Good to be here. Always good to be here. Welcome to a brand new episode of Matt's Art Chat, my weekly series of conversations on the arts with creators, curators, and art lovers from all over the world. If you're watching the video version, I must apologize. I'm a little bit annoyed because I did try to use my camcorder with my external microphone. I spent several hours on trying to make it work, but it just did not work out. And because I'm just strapped for time at the moment, I just have to, this is another webcam version. But of course, if you are watching the video version, it's really not necessary that you do, because Matt's Art Chat is also available on several audio platforms, including Spotify, Podbean, Mixcloud, and several others. I don't even know. I lose track of them sometimes. But having said that, and please forgive me once again for my webcam thing, I have to pick audio over video quality. It's all about the conversation. It's a good one, this episode, because I'm speaking with internationally acclaimed Toronto-based interior designer / artist / self-proclaimed art junkie, and it's always great to have an art junkie on the show, Nora VOON, who actually has her own company as well, Nora Designs, and we talk about the work that Nora Designs does as well in this conversation. But here's where I'm coming from. Part of the reason why I spend time doing these podcasts, and it takes a bit of time to do them, is because I love the arts. But I'm not an expert on all of the sectors of the arts. I'm hardly a sector on any of them. There are some that I know more about than others, and certainly interior design is not one of them. But my aim is to actually learn more about them and approach these conversations with a childlike curiosity, because I really am fascinated, and my aim is to find out as much as I can about the various sectors of what Pierre Bourdieu would define as field of artistic production. So, speaking with Nora VOON about interior design gave me a great opportunity to find out more about what she does, because she is an expert in her field. Like I said, she is internationally acclaimed. She works in a wide variety of spaces, and I'm a great admirer of the character of spaces, of the beauty of spaces, and the work that goes on to get it all to happen. So Nora was great to chat with, because aside from being an expert, she also has her own unique ideas about interior design. And during the conversation, I realized that a lot of that comes from just a desire to just think outside the box, to go beyond what is identified as the norm, and also to just break the rules. Maybe there is a bit of a rebelliousness about her work. And I certainly admire that, because most of the great works of art, you can sense that rebelliousness. In a way, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before. Art is an act of rebellion, whether it is one form of art or the other. Doesn't matter. So this is a conversation about interior design, especially good for beginners, because my questions are probably not going in depth into the details of interior design, but it looks more at the inspiration, some of the work that goes into interior design, but also in Nora's own work, because like I said, she does have a unique personal approach, which is probably why in the conversation you're going to hear a lot of times terms like personality or character. All of that stuff it's really there in Nora's work and in what she does with Nora Designs. So I think that covers the introduction for now. Next one, I'm going to try to get that camcorder going, because I'm really annoyed at having to see my face and the way it comes out in the thing and the webcam. But it's not that I've looked that much better, but I try to get as good as I can with what I've got. Right now, shops are opening in Prague, so maybe I'll be able to work something out. But for now, this is the best I can do, I promise you. Nevertheless, the conversations are good, folks. And certainly this one with Nora was really special. And I hope that you will enjoy listening to it. So without further ado, enjoy. Nora, how are you?
Hi, Matt. Nice to be here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure for me to talk with you. It's a pleasure. Now, you are currently in Toronto, right?
Yes, I moved here about 7 years ago, 2013, from London, UK, and I'm Canadian. And when we moved away for probably 18 years ago from Toronto. So, yeah, based back in Canada.
Yes, back in Canada. What's the situation? It's a crazy world that we're living in at the moment. What's the situation there?
Currently, with what we're doing, actually, we've been pretty busy during the COVID times. And we've just been quietly working, at home and on projects everywhere. I've got projects sort of scattered everywhere. So it doesn't really matter where I am. We can just work remotely and send our work to our clients through, emails and things and Zoom and, we're not in shortage of that.
That's great. That's great to hear that the pandemic hasn't impacted your work in a drastic way. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you about your work in the wonderful world of design. I don't get to do that very often. In fact, this may be the first time that I get to do an interview about it. And I'm looking forward to also asking you about Nora Design, the work that you do with your own company. But first, just as an icebreaker, because this is a podcast that completely revolves around art and thoughts about the art and various fields of art, I wanted to quite simply ask you, and feel free to answer it in any way you like, what role would you say art has played in your own life?
Okay. So I'm an art junkie by confession. I chase art, really. How does it affect my work and how does it come along? I've always loved art history, to be honest, and that's how I studied art history in uni and also environmental science. And I find that art speaks the truth, and in many ways it also delivers a message, right? So for me, I use art as an interpretation of sometimes I want to take a playful take on things for my client and not too serious, but kind of relay the message and to sort of inject some personality into my work other than just, making clean lines, nice work, but doesn't speak about the personality of the person, which is why I like to bring art into my work. And that's how I really, it's always been a part of my design scope that I would always incorporate certain artful things within the space. Yeah.
Excellent. And just so everybody understands, what do we, because I know that the word is going to pop up a lot during our conversation and people may not be aware of what it means. What do we mean when we use the term design, and do you have a personal interpretation of the term?
Design is a very broad sort of word, right? You use it in fashion. You even use it in, anything to do with design. Obviously, even in industrial design, it's still design. For me, as an interior design, I think that design needs to speak about art and form and functionality. If you don't have form, which is the beauty and the look, you need to incorporate both things. So for me, if a space works, then, it's great, but it needs to look beautiful too, right? At the end of the day, that's what you hire a designer or an architect for. And therefore, our job is to make form and function work together really well. And that's very important in my field of design, I think.
And did you experience a moment in your life when you realized that, a career in design was the work for you?
I've always wanted to be an architect, to be honest. As a kid, I've always wanted to be an architect. But, growing up and having so many different influences and choosing a career. And when you're so young, I feel that sometimes you don't know what you want to be. So I've tried many different things. I've tried being in banking. I've tried being a chef, and I've also tried in advertising as well. But for me, my first love has always been architecture. So for me, instead of going back to school and doing another few years of architecture, I decided, you know what? I actually prefer interior design more because it deals with more details and not just the macro of design. It's more about the little details that make the difference. And that's what I love doing. And so for me, it was a no-brainer to go into interior design as a starting point. For me, my dream is to have a lifestyle brand that kind of expand from not just interior design, but more into a lifestyle brand that also design, products for interiors. So for me, starting in interior design was sort of a starting point, and I love my job and I love what I do, and I'm constantly evolving from going to different trade shows and learning from different cultures by just, traveling and getting inspired from all these different things that I see. So for me, that's what got me into interior design. And I kind of dropped everything else and went to that.
Interesting. And do you find your past experiences in doing all the work that you did before you started your company influences your work right now?
Absolutely. It's good to have a different experience before coming into design. I'm not saying that, if you want to be an interior designer at a very young age, you should definitely pursue that. What I'm saying with my life experiences with banking, for example, just dealing the business side of things is so important other than just being creative in what you do. Because let's face it, right? When you have an interior design business, most people, if you ask them, most designers, if you ask them, they will tell you 80% is business and it's 20% creativity. Reason being, you have a client, you have a brief, you have a scope of work. So you have to follow that brief and you have to deliver what your client asks of you. So that's very important. Your skill in, budget costings and scheduling and organizing, all of that has nothing to do with design. It has everything to do with how to run a business, how to run a project and project management. All of that ties into a very big part of interior design and in our field as well.
And actually, I was going to ask you about this as well. Do you find that it's difficult to find a balance between art, just the artistic side of things and the business side of things?
Oh, it's like two different spectrum, right? I'll give you an example. Let's say I come up with a very creative way of doing a space, right? It's a little bit different. It's a little bit out there. The client loves it. But now we have to go into budget costing, right? And they will say, how much is this going to cost me? So now I have to come back and tell him, this is how much it's going to cost you because this is the way it's done. And because it's a special item or whatever that we created, let's say a custom piece. And sometimes when you create a custom piece, you have to go into the logistics of how to build something from scratch. And that takes a lot of time, and money, basically. And sometimes that doesn't meet with when you say the art and the interior, that's where it comes in. Sometimes it's a great concept, but sometimes budget limits you. So you have to find new ways of compromising the first idea and then hone it down to where it's feasible, right? For your client to afford it, and all the other logistics that goes with it.
What's interesting to me as you were explaining that is that I was thinking of a lot of parallels with the film industry in a way. I don't know whether you ever thought about that.
No, why? Why would that be? I guess, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, that prompts the question. Do you think of that relationship with the client as a sort of an artistic collaboration as well?
No, we always say interior designers are like psychiatrists. You have to understand what your client is asking you to do. Some clients say, okay, I love your style. I want this, right? And you go in with this expectations that your client is okay with you being creatively brave. But then what they want is not what they say they want sometimes. So you really have to really understand the psychology of what they're saying. So sometimes I have clients that are great. They will just say, all right, Nora, I trust you. Just go for it, and I will go for it, get all the costings done, and then just show them, do a presentation and explain to them my logic behind my concept. And they're happy to go for it. that's great, but that's not every day and it's not real life. And so, yeah, you have to find a real balance and understand really what your client needs and really, ask a lot of questions about their day to day, what they like, what they don't like, what is okay, what is not okay. And there's also building codes and other stuff that we need to adhere to and to follow. So, certain things, there's always a point where you come with a concept. This is the great concept, but then you'll never actually execute the first concept as you want it to be. There are many, many modifications throughout the process to where you execute the final product.
So let's get into some of the aspects of your work in more detail. And I was looking at some of your work online, and I even watched some of the videos that are out there about your work. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that got to me, and we'll talk about other things as well, but one of the things that got to me was that I was watching one of the videos, and I think you mentioned that you don't like to work with very traditional styles. What did you mean by that?
Okay, I should rephrase that. It's not that I don't like to do the traditional styles. It's that sometimes I can't bring it's every designer has their signature. And for me, I'd rather do more contemporary or even crazy stuff. The traditional style I'm not familiar with. And it's not that I'm not familiar with. It's just that I don't see myself doing my best in that because it's not my vision and it's not my design ethos. So for me, it's more difficult for me to execute something that's very, very traditional. It doesn't mean it's not possible. There's just going to be a lot of research that goes into it. We study all of the different styles when we're in school, but every designers sort of have their vision of how they want to see spaces that they create. And for me, traditional is not my strong area. And I will put my hand up for that. If you're asking me to do a palazzo for you that is very traditional, all the money in the world, I cannot take your project because I know I won't do a good job. And that's just me being very honest, right? And every designer should say that, if I've said no to so many projects because of that. Like certain things, I just wouldn't go there because I don't want my client to not be happy with, they're paying you to do a job and you need to do a good job. So if you're not really good at that stuff, you should speak up and say, you know what, I'm not the person for you.
Right.
So,
it's important to make the style clear.
Yeah. And it's also not to mislead them, right? Like you tell them, yeah, I can do it. And then, they expect you to do it. And then you come up with something else and they're not going to be happy, right?
You mentioned that you're an art junkie, but also I was wondering, what role would you say something like multiculturality play in your work? Does it play an important role, for example, in the way in which you source elements of your interior design pieces?
Not necessarily culturally. I would say my design style is more maximalism. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It's sort of, it's a lot of bold patterns. It's a lot of colors. It's a lot of things that don't really go together. And you're going to tell me, oh my God, this sounds like a disaster, Nora. But somehow it works. That's my style. So I like to provoke people when it comes to interior. I don't like to follow rules. Certain things, if you tell me, oh, you have to do certain things certain way, like, proportionally, this doesn't look right. Well, for me, I'm looking at it in an artistic view. And also, again, I'm going to keep expressing the word, personality. That's what I focus on in most of my interiors. I want the client to feel that once they enter that space, it's all about them or all about what they want to convey. So, like you said, culturally, yeah, I have a lot of cultural influences from different things that I've seen or different shows that I've been to. They're all great and they're all great sort of, a library in my head in a way. And when I find a project that could apply to that, specific, design style, then I would use it. But most importantly for me, it's all about the client's personality. It's all about or even a brand, right? If I'm representing a client that's doing commercial space, I have to know what their brand is about. And that's sort of my ingredient for every project. I have to find out what it means for me to create the space and to showcase what they give me as a brief.
So I'm really interested about the process then of sourcing these elements. Do you have like any specific way of finding these things that you know you will include in an interior design piece?
It all depends on the project. You know, a commercial space is very different how we would design as opposed to an interior for a residential space. So for example, if you are doing a hotel somewhere in Bali, for example, right? You do need to give some cultural sort of expression of that space because of the weather. So the material you're using is different, you know. So all of that stuff come into play when you design in that process. So for example, if it's a hotel in Bali, you would use lighter material. You would use material that can help you block out, you know, for example, heat, you know, different ways of accommodating to the atmosphere and the space, as well as how people use the space. So all of that needs to come into play with just, you know, anything from picking materials to machineries that you're going to be using within the space, all of that.
So far, we've talked about identity, personality, and also the importance for you to make your style clear to the clients. But I was also wondering, how important would you say is it for you to keep up with the times and maybe just look at the current trends in design?
It's, you know, I don't say this enough to any designers or any people who want to go into the designer field. You really need to keep yourself up to date. I go to trade shows at least twice a year, sometimes 3 or 4 times. You know, we travel to Asia for their trade show. We've traveled to Europe for all the trade shows. Every year we do it. And we've been to Middle East for that as well. By the way, in Lebanon, they have amazing creative people. They make the best stuff there. And everyone is very creative and artistic. So you can find really great artisans. Turkey is another place. So, you know, you kind of just update yourself. You have to read a lot of articles. You have to see what's new in the market, what kind of innovative products they've come up with, especially now with COVID, you know, like we have to learn about all these new products that we sort of already have in the market. Certain things like, you know, touchless faucets, UV lights that kills germs, all of these things. We need to keep ourselves up to date so that we can apply all of that for what's going to come now after COVID. You know, there are so many new things as designers. We kind of have to go back to the drawing board and kind of rethink how we design, you know, from personal space to certain materials that we're using that are more antimicrobial. You know, they have paint that are antimicrobial, all these things. So it's important to keep yourself up to date is what I'm saying. And you need to do it constantly every single year because every year new things come out and you just need to, you know, update yourself in a way.
Yeah. No, it's interesting what you said about how the coronavirus pandemic will have an impact on design. And especially because when I think about it, the pandemic was sort of a sudden thing, but you always have to be ready to kind of respond to it.
Yep. I mean, we are coming up with more and more things, even before COVID, right? All these touchless things have already been in the market for a while, but people don't use them because obviously they're a little bit more expensive because of the technology that they've put into the research and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, but now you don't have a choice. You actually have to use them because this is the world we live in now. So yeah, it's important to always keep yourself informed.
Thinking about other things that I noticed on your website, one of the things that I noticed was that there's a reference to sense of humor, and I just wanted to know what that meant.
So when I say sense of humor, I don't want my clients to always take design so seriously, meaning you know, I don't know if you saw my Instagram the other day. I designed this pink staircase for my studio. And then when I went to the metal staircase guy that's producing the staircase, he goes, what color do you want? I go, I want it pink. And he goes, what? Are you crazy? I go, no, I want it pink. And he goes, nobody does a pink stairs. I go, why are you arguing me? I'm the designer. I want a pink stairs. Make it. He goes, okay. So they made it, and they thought I was crazy in the beginning, but then they've installed it on site, and it's so gorgeous. And they told me themselves, we thought you were crazy, but now looking at it in situ, it's amazing. And it's so different. It's a conversational piece. Whoever will come across it, you know, you just can't miss it. That's what I mean by humor. It's a little bit bold. It's a little bit not too serious. And you might think it's crazy in the beginning, but when everything comes together, you'll see what I mean. And it actually makes it more interesting.
No, definitely. I understand it now, because so far, you know, you've mentioned that you like to defy the rules. And in a sense, that too represents that defiance of the rules, let's say.
Yeah. So I have a Instagram follower that wrote me, you know, pink is not my color, but I really, really love this pink stairs. So if I can make somebody who doesn't like pink to like the staircase, it means that, you know, you don't have to take things so seriously. Like, I've never heard, well, I don't know, but you know, when was the last time you heard somebody wanted a pink staircase, right? It did sound ridiculous when you asked for it, but when you see it in the big picture, it comes together, and it's okay.
Could you think of any other example of something that maybe people at first went like, no, that sounds crazy, but then in the end they were all like, oh yeah, that definitely works?
I would love to challenge anyone who I would like to see if anyone who comes to my new studio, because it's a very, very wacky place. My whole idea for my showroom is that I want you to come in. I want you to have an experience. I don't want you to just feast your eyes out to look at beautiful things, because there are too many beautiful things in this world that we cannot just, you know, showcase everything. But I want you to go into my space and say, oh my God, I would never think of I have a bathroom that has an infinity archway that when you go to this powder room, you feel like you're going into a tunnel, and it's an infinity arches. It's all done with lighting, and it's something that's crazy, right? And then you open the door and there's a neon sign that says, welcome to the shit show, because it's a powder room. So it's just take a lot of tongue in cheek. And people always say, you know, I test people all the time on Instagram. I put out my drawings and I say, what do you like? A, B, or C? You know, and people will respond A, B, or C. And from that, you can tell, actually, people want to be provoked, and people are hungry for the little, individuality. They just need somebody like us to bring out that voice in them, you know? And when they see it in a space where you can express yourself in that way, then I think that people would react differently.
I love that. Welcome to the shit show is a great one.
So, yeah.
So specifically though, I wanted to go back and talk about Nora Designs, because I know that we've been talking about all sorts of things, and but I wanted to ask you, and this may be a silly question, but where does the name actually come from?
Okay, so Nora came from Nora, my name, Nora, and the Da is my partner in UK. We started our business in London, UK, and my partner then, her name, she's Daria, and so that's how we came up with Nora.
Oh,
and
right.
I still kept it, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. And when was it founded?
Oh God, 2005.
Oh, right. So it's been around for a while.
Yeah, but we've been in the UK until 2013, so.
Oh, right.
And we're new in Toronto.
Was there a reason for moving to Toronto specifically related to maybe the world of designs?
No, basically it's for personal reasons. So when I moved back here, I actually didn't start Nora up, in the beginning, first 2 years. I was still working out of my UK office, which I travel to every month. I haven't been there for the last 4 months. So that's sort of, Yeah, it's for personal reasons, and I'm kind of here now, so might as well make the best of it.
Exactly. No, the reason why I asked you that is because I was also maybe curious to know whether Toronto was an inspiring city in some way. I personally have never been.
It is inspiring because I feel in the design world, Toronto is still very young in that sense. Meaning, when I moved here in 2013, I remember saying to my colleague at the time, I said, give Toronto 5 to 10 years. It will be a very different landscape when it comes to design. Because when I first came, for the first 2 years, all I did was see what the market is looking for, right? What people want and what is out there, what is being offered. And I realized that there are a lot of companies that sell a lot of things in the design world. It's all the same. And there's no variety. And I said, you know what? Toronto is actually a really good place to start a brand that if you want to be different, you can be. You know, coming from London, there are so many of us in London and everybody is so creative and everybody has their own unique style and they're all great and they're all amazing. I'm not saying Toronto doesn't have that. I'm saying that Toronto is still very new because they're not very bold. But in the last 5 years, since 2013, I see a huge shift in the way people see design. Even if you go out on the street now and you see how they build, you're seeing a big change in the landscape of architecture alone, you know? So I know that Toronto is a great place to really launch something that's different and to feed people with another perspective of how you see design. So that's what I'm trying to create, a really niche perspective of design style, design functionality, and to kind of make the world kind of smaller and bring it all together in one space.
But when you were looking at Toronto there, in a way, you were it was almost as if you were looking at a blank canvas.
Yes, I was very excited when I started this venture because I think there's so much more you can offer in Toronto. Just the art alone. I mean, the art scene here is starting to become more and more every year. Even with the Toronto Biennale, you see people are more engaging in the art world. You know, 20 years ago, we have 2 museums, you know, and literally all the exhibitions last for months and months and they don't change. And the way they curate the exhibition is also very important in the art world. And I feel Toronto has so much potential. We have so many good artists and so many different points of view. I think that Toronto is still very young in that sense in the art, events. You know, we've got a few art shows of the year, like you've got the Art Project, you've got the Toronto, what was that one? The one at Convention Center, I forgot the name. But there's a few. But I feel like, you know, compared to the world, we're still very, very new at this. You know, like if you look at Frieze, London and Frieze, New York, you have all the artists in the world come in and they do this big exhibition. I mean, Toronto has that, but the content and the amount of artists that we get involved with is still very, very small, I think. I think there's so much potential. That's why MySpace is also, it's also an art platform for new artists who wants a space to showcase what they create.
And it's interesting too, what you mentioned earlier, again, emphasizing the point about personality, when you mentioned that companies sort of had the same designs and, you know, more or less, but it's important for them too, to kind of project their personality through the design.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the way Toronto needs to find a way to find that too.
They do. Like, they are moving towards that. I feel there are more expression in the way they see design now in Toronto. And that's very true. You've got a few really amazing firms, young firms that it's been around for the last 6-7 years. And they're doing very well progressively over the last few years from the projects that they've done. You see that these guys, they know, I think Toronto interior designers are amazing technically when it comes to, you know, all the little details. They really know how to build. Whereas European designers are better creatively rather than technically. That's the difference I find between Europe and North America. North American designers are very, very, very well educated in the field of technical stuff. They're real architects, to be honest. You know, to call an interior designer just an interior designer in Canada or North America, it's, you know, you're not giving them justice, because when people say interior design, they straight away go to decorator. And that's a very different field as opposed to interior design. Interior designers actually build. We don't just, you know, pick colors and pick tiles. We do everything. We design the space. So that is the difference. And I feel Toronto designers are great in that field. And not to say, you know, not to discourage the fact that they are not creative. It's not that. It's that I think exposure is important as self-growth as a designer. So if you are limited to what you're exposed to, then, you know, your creativity can only go so far, right? So I think that Toronto is not that they are not creative. It's that I think the exposure is still very limited. In terms of the trade shows, even when you come here to see a trade show here in Toronto, I've seen that stuff 5 years ago in Italy. And they're just only introducing it here. You know, that's like, but the gap is closing though. It's closing very fast.
Is the online world something that you focus on as well, in terms of maybe even just promoting yourself? And has it helped you in any way? Does it help you interact with people in any way?
Absolutely. I think we cannot run away from online anymore. Especially now with COVID, people are more, you know, they think twice before they go out to a retail shop now. Do they want to wait in line? You know, there's so many aspects that it just discourages you to go outside and go to a store. So I think online, there's no doubt, is the way forward. And if you're not in it, you better get on it. And in terms of how I interact with my sort of people, if you would call it, yeah, it's been very helpful for me. I mean, I go online and I ask questions and people answer. It helps me, you know, it helps me see how people think.
And finally, very last question, because you mentioned earlier that you are an art junkie, and I absolutely love that term. I just wanted to ask you a very general question. Is there anything recently that is sort of your current art obsession?
You're you're asking an art junkie that question. I mean, oh God, anything. Well, I'm still very much into my glass collection. I love Italian glass, and I love all these Murano glass, as you would call it. I still collect those. Like every time I see one, I can't help myself. I will have to buy one. And, you know, you find them in antique shops, you find them in flea markets. Some of them are not very expensive, some are, but people don't make glass like that anymore. And if they do, it's cost you an arm and a leg. So I really still appreciate that. And that's sort of like my go-to. Every time I see one, I can't stop myself.
Nora, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was fun.